Okay, well, hello everyone, and thank you, B-Sides, for giving me the opportunity to speak here. And I've come to speak about Write Your Damn Report. Just to introduce myself, I'm one of the security consultants at Pentest. I've been a pen tester for about 20 years now. I'm also an open source developer, and I'm also a chapter lead for OWASP Manchester. And just a little plug, we still have a few slots for our April meet, if anyone wants to join us. Now, you may be wondering why I chose to come and speak about this rather dull topic that's a bit of an anathema to many pen testers. Well, the seed was planted last year when in one of the wrap-up speaks, someone said, no one's come and talked about pen test reporting. And I thought, well, hang on, is this relevant to us? I mean, perhaps just to get a feel for the audience, I mean, who here has ever written a pen test report? And who here has read or received a pen test report? Okay. And who here has got an opinion about what makes a good pen test report? Right, fantastic. So I think we're on board. Now, I've got quite a lot of experience building bespoke report generation systems. Basically, I've worked at 3 different jobs and built 3 entirely different report generation systems to suit the different workflows. And what I thought I'd do today is just share in chronologically my experience. So my very first job in cyber was at a vulnerability assessment firm. So this was doing like large automated scans of estates. And they'd got like an automated system with central database and scan nodes, and there were scripts to take the tool output as XML and pass it into the database. And then there was like a workflow for the testers to go through and like confirm or mark stuff as false positives. And then finally, all that data was used to generate HTML reports. Now, it was at this job that someone gave me a very good piece of advice, and this has really stuck with me. Because what we were doing, we were mostly taking Nest's output and mapping it to our own descriptions. And the advice I was given was, before writing the description, don't just try and like paraphrase what's come out of the tool. Understand what the vulnerability is first. Read the description, read the supporting references. When you understand it, at that point, you can, in writing, explain what you understand to the client. And I think it really stands out when you read a report if what someone's writing is something they understand or something they're paraphrasing. And then crucially, if a client comes back to you and challenges you, what you do not want to do is just say, oh, that's just what the scanner said. You want to have some ownership of it. So this bit of advice must be 20 years ago I was given this, but I think it's just as valid today as it was then. Now, having all the scan data in a database gave a number of advantages. It meant some of these features were quite straightforward to implement, so we could have suppressions. So if a client says this is a false positive, it's marked as a false positive and it stays that in future scans. You can highlight what's new in a scan, and you can give reports that are organised in different ways. You can have it by host, by vulnerability. And also, you can do trending reports. So I remember the front page of the scans looked something like this, which I thought was like a really like nice introduction. It's a very high level view, a bit like a graphical exec summary. And then what someone can do is they can drill into the detail that's particularly relevant to them. One thing though that I would point out is whenever you do these kind of graphs, the low-risk vulnerabilities tend to sort of overwhelm everything else. If you take an initial look at this, you think, what are our IT teams doing? You know, here we are, 8 months into the scanning program, and we've only, like, reduced that much. But the thing is, no one really cares about lows, do they? So actually, what is much more useful to a client is that. And if you wipe away the cruft, you see what's important. Something that was quite cool about doing the reports as HTML was that they were dynamic. So you could have little checkboxes to like enable and disable different risk ratings. Okay, so that was job one. Database backed, HTML reports. I can see some big benefits from doing it that way. And then I came to job two. And this was at an in-house pen test team. And here, the report template, it was a Word document. And thus began a somewhat love-hate relationship with Word in this context. So you'll all be familiar with this. So the report had its scope, had exec summary, it had a table of the findings, and then it drilled down into the detail of the findings. And I was thinking, okay, well, where's the cool automated database-backed system? Well, there was a shared document on a drive with some commonly used text. But of course, no one even really updated that. So the reality is what you did is if you wanted some boilerplate text, you went on an old report and you copied it from that. And actually, what I realized was it was, in a lot of ways, this was a bit anti-team because everyone had kind of their own list of old reports that they'd used and they were different. And I thought it got away in the way of collaboration. And then you'd send it to stakeholders as a PDF. And I've realized that there are a lot of reasons people like PDFs for the reports, because if your report's like in an HTML portal, and 5 years down the line you have some incident, and you want to show evidence that you had a pen test done, and then you point at this portal and it's like, oh, well, data retention policy or company's gone out of business. Having it all as a file that you can save in a shared folder and keep is actually really valuable. It just means you miss out on all the cool stuff you can do in HTML. The other thing I realized is, having seen all the cool stuff you could do with trending data, there was virtually no interest in it at all. Almost all the systems would be pen tested once in a blue moon, maybe once as a project, and if we're lucky, once in the next 5 years. I mean, maybe that was a shortcoming on their part, but that's how it was. There was just no interest in that trending data. But despite this, I thought, come on guys, I can do all this cool stuff with a database-backed reporting system. So I built, it was a kind of renegade, sort of semi-approved project. And it was a Python web app using TurboGears, which was the cool framework at the time. But because they were primarily a Microsoft house, one of the things I had to agree to was to make it run on Microsoft Tech, even though it was Python. So I actually ended up doing quite a lot of contributions to TurboGears and SQL Alchemy to make them work well on Microsoft Tech. And it had a cool online scoping form, and because this was all internal, I could expose this on the intranet, and it was all single sign-on. And then similarly, we had scripts to pass tool output, testing workflow, and then PDFs were generated from the data in the database. Now, one massive benefit we had as an in-house team is we had access to really good tooling. So I previously, a lot of my infrastructure work had primarily just been Nessus. Now, I did a lot of scanning, credential scanning of Windows servers. But as well as Nessus, we had access to security expressions. So this was really helpful. It meant we had two completely independent tools that were looking for the same classes of vulnerabilities. And I was able to do some quite fun stuff with this. So, this is a little intro to the database schema that was used. So, as tool output was passed and put in the database, it would all go in a results table. So we'd have a target, and then the tool that found it, and then all the tools, they will output an ID for their specific finding. And then separately, we got our table of vulnerability descriptions. And then what pieced it all together was this vul map table. So this would take the tuple, the tool, and the tool's ID, and it would map it to our own ID. Now, at first, it took quite a bit of effort to build up this data. But in time, this became incredibly valuable, because what we could do is we could import both the tool's output into our testing workflow. And for each finding, we could see which tools had flagged it up. And at this point, I made a policy decision that if the two tools agreed, that was just truth. I wasn't going to do any manual investigation, and if I ever got called on it, I think that was justifiable. But the really interesting part was when the tools disagreed. And what that meant is we could focus the manual follow-up to cases where it really added value. We ended up finding a whole load of bugs in Nessus, actually. A thing Nessus recurrently did is if you've got like patch A, and then patch B that supersedes patch A, and you've got a server that's got patch B installed, not patch A. Now, Security Expressions was quite good at understanding this relationship. Now, Nessus kind of tried to, and did maybe like 80% of the time, but it often failed to. And of course, we could then see that, do a bit of manual follow-up. The other thing, of course, in this example, only Nessus has found it. Unfortunately, when it comes to third-party software on Windows, the reach of both tools was fairly limited. So at Microsoft stuff, they were pretty solid. When it came to 7-zip or something, in this case, only Nessus was able to pick it up. Now, we also did a lot of web app testing at this company. And what I did was I continued the database model. So I just effectively treated manual testing as yet another tool. So it was in the workflow. You could add a manual result. You could add some extra text detail. I think in hindsight, we were probably pretty light on the detail that we did include. And then this leads me to my third job, where I worked at a pen test consultancy. Now, the very first thing I noticed was that immediately there were high expectations around report quality, and that everything that was reported had to have a lot of detail. It had to have like evidence, screenshots, request response blocks. What the CSO always said is, we've got to be able to reproduce it. Whether it's a client or whether it's your colleague a year down the line, you've got to be able to reproduce it. And that means quite a lot of detail. Also, there was a peer QA process. So you weren't allowed to just finish a report and send it off to a client. You had to get it through the QA process. And that originally used a LaTeX-based system. Now, this is where I got another piece of good advice, because quite a number of consultants, including myself, would have a tendency to build up a bit of a backlog of reporting. Do the work, the report ends up being late. And the solution to this is to report as you go. Don't leave it to the end, do it as you go. So I built a database-backed system for this company. And we did go back to using Word, and we found that there were a lot of benefits to Word, especially around the QA process. The track changes feature is very powerful. There's not a lot other than Word that does that so fluidly. So we used a tool called DocX Templates, and that's quite cool because it lets you put tags right in a Word document, and then it will then process these and like fill in data. But very soon, we hit all sorts of problems. So DocX Templates can do some things, but if you want to do fancy things, it's limited. To access the database, you need to be online. So if you're in a client data center, you might be out of luck. But the biggest problem was a workflow pain in that once you generate this Word document from the database, you were then a bit stuck, because if you edited the Word document, if you then regenerated it, you lost all your changes. And also things like, it could get really annoying to say, because it's generated a graph and a table and a description, if while you're writing up you decide, this isn't actually high risk, this is only medium, you've got to then go back and change the table and change the graph. Now, one of my colleagues introduced me to a completely different architecture for this. And it meant letting go of a lot of things, because I'd seen a lot of benefit of using a database for everything. And his design was to throw this all away, just have a Word add-in. And one of the massive benefits, of course, is because you're using the official Microsoft interface, is you've got access to everything. I mean, sometimes it's a bit arcane, but in general, simple things are easy and complex things are possible. And we'd still have a knowledge base of vulnerability descriptors, but it was cached locally. So if you were in the middle of a data center, you could still access it. And I think what proved to be very beneficial is this really fitted well with this report as you go workflow process. And I will just to show you what this works like. You can do things like, okay, you can do things like you can add a port scan result, and all it's doing is just directly passing the XML and dumping it in Word, and there's no database involved. And then another feature a colleague did was a burp extension. Now, burp, of course, it does lovely syntax highlighting of your requests and responses, but if you copy and paste it into a Word document, you lose all the nice syntax highlighting. This extension lets you copy it and keep the syntax highlighting, which was a really nice touch. If you want to have a nosy at other companies' pen test reports, there is an online repository that's got many of them. And I think a conclusion is 3 jobs, 3 very different reporting systems, and this is possibly why so many pen test firms have a bespoke system and that the commercial systems don't get that widely used. And I think my final point is, considering there's all this cool stuff that we can do with database-backed HTML reports, and we don't do it because we're making PDFs, I think we could do a bit more innovation in reporting. So the word add-in is not and won't be. That burp extension, he's got a long-term intention to make it open source.
When you say innovation in the project, what kind of things are you looking for? And then it's street mind. And one thing we've seen is that all kind of very focus on data use. So it's very sort of focused mind about we produce this data, we use as and find forming that data, and then being able to use it in ways.
Yeah, so innovation I was thinking of, it would be really cool if we did actually do HTML reports. You can stick all the HTML stuff in a single file, so you've still got that feature that it's a single file that the client can keep, and you could have dynamic stuff. In terms of making the data open, I mean, quite often I end up putting things in spreadsheets for clients. I think going further than that would be difficult because typically you're not engaging with the same client that much. Yeah. So, I mean, something around that, people sometimes ask, like, can you automatically create tickets? And that's normally turned out to be a bad idea. But I think what's quite a nice touch, you see some tooling, it's got a button so you can do a one-click create a ticket. So someone like a project manager or a scrum master, they can look at the results and they can then make a human-based decision about if they're going to fix it or not. And then if they are, it's one click, and at least that takes care of a lot of the clerical stuff. But yeah, I mean, This is exactly what I mean. Doing more stuff like this would be good innovation to see. So in terms of work experience, I'm afraid at the minute Pentest aren't able to offer that. We have done in the past, maybe we will in the future. In terms of advice, I think I'd go back to, was it my second or third slide? Where I said, don't regurgitate, understand. Work on understanding. And I think when you're communicating with people in the industry, the way you speak will prove your understanding, and that'll take you a long way.
Anyone else massively questioning so try to run that stuff at IIS, that's incredible. But you're absolutely right, you need to understanding, not just interpreting, tool, it's done. Ladies and gentlemen, please, last round of applause.